What is up, everybody? Josh Tapp here again, and welcome back to the Lucky Titan podcast. And today we're here with Bob. I got to pronounce this right. Kulhan. I really struggle with that name beforehand, everybody.
Perfect. You nailed it.
Good preparation. We have a lot of people we bring on their names I just butcher, so it's fun to get it right sometimes, right? So anyway, so Bob is the founder and CEO of Business Improv, and I'm really excited to have him here today because this guy is all about basically taking his comedy career and turning it towards business, helping people with that improv as we call it. And honestly, I think the communication aspect is one for almost all of us we struggle with. I still even struggle with it, right? And I do this 4 hours a day. So there's a lot to learn here. So I'm excited, Bob, to have you here. Say what's up to everybody and we'll hop in.
I'm so glad to be here, Josh. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get into this.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm going to ask you, and this is a little bit of an unorthodox question for you, but I want to ask you this. If you had to start over because you have built a successful company, so if you had to start completely from scratch and you only had 90 days to build a business that provided for your family, what would you build? It's my very first question.
Can I build a COVID vaccine business in 90 days?
Genius.
Kind of inoculation, like airborne, just spray it and over.
Yeah, get it over with, and we can all move on.
I think a strong business that's really rooted in people, just connecting people. So like a networking type of business, I'm a natural bridge builder anyway. I like making connections. I like introducing people to each other. And so just having a more formal aspect of getting people together, networking, sharing ideas, best practices in a really safe environment. I think that's the path that I would take.
It's really hilarious is almost everybody I interview says something like that. It's
really
all about, it's connecting people. And I just had to ask you because I thought you'd have a fun take on it, but it's really funny how it's like, it's all about the people and it's always a high ticket service. Right? Something you can make quite a bit of money doing that. And it has everything to do with like connection. Right. So I love that.
Yeah, you did say I have to take care of my family, so I'd rather not do it on a check-by-check basis. Right. I want it to be large. What I didn't tell you is that everybody has to get through a ring of fire before you get there.
Yeah.
And now I'm at it, and there's some lions on the other side.
So there's a fight with a bear before you get to meet anybody. See, and I love that, especially with business, because there's such kind of like a paradigm that we have to start by selling something small. To like, it's either like a t-shirt or I'm going to launch this course, but it's only going to be $37 because I don't know if I could sell it for anything more. But what I've loved about even our conversation before this is that you really built a business, your current business, around helping people to connect, but on a much more profound level. And when you sent me your bio, engagement and connection in a virtual world, like I love that. And that will be the title of the podcast because that is what we're struggling with right now. Before this, I've always been in the virtual world. So like it really wasn't a big change. If I didn't ever see the news, I probably wouldn't know COVID had happened. And the thing that's really intriguing though, is that most companies are like a year later, still scrambling, trying to figure out how do we like build engagement with people. So I want to ask you this, what would be kind of your framework or your methodology around helping people to communicate better with their audiences and with their teams?
First, remember, it's about people. I think one of the challenges, Josh, that a lot of people really embraced was technology. And that's where we went right away in this world that we're in right now. And I think to a degree, there's accuracy there. It has to be accurate. Like, how are we using this technology? Which technology are we going to use? Does it have to be flashy? Can it just be something of substance? For me, though, it's all about people. People. If we're not connecting with people, if we're not communicating with people, then it's all going to fall apart anyway, because that's just two-dimensional stuff. That's smoke and mirrors. The smoke will dissipate, the mirrors will become very clear, and we'll find out whether or not if we were able to actually reach out to each other effectively. So for me, remembering that human element, that human connection element is pivotal to making those connections.
Yeah, and I love that because it's kind of hard to do that behind a screen, right? And you and I were even talking about this beforehand. A podcast is a prime example of this. So people have like their little different ways to make it happen. But for us, we found that we need to have a conversation before this because we've got to get the momentum. You've got to get that flow. And it brings me back to thinking about I can't remember who it was, Stephen King, somebody, like a really great author. And they said what they would do before they would ever start writing is they would just write nonsense, like whatever was on the top of their head for 20 minutes, because it got the brain going in the right direction, got the, in my opinion, like the flow, the energy state into the right place so that they could be ready. And that's kind of what you're talking
Well,
about,
to a
right?
degree, because what you've just actually done for me or to me is trigger something else, which is this energy aspect of it. So great improvisers warm up before they get up on stage. And that's that same aspect of let's loosen up, let's shed our inhibitions, let's get out of our head from whatever else is going on in the world, let alone on our laundry list that happens every single day. Let's be focused, let's be present in the moment, and let's connect with each other, as the majority of improvisation is a team event anyway. So let's get connected with each other right there in that moment. And if we can do that as people before engagements, and by engagements I mean internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders, our team as well as our clients that we're facing, then we increase the probability of making this connection through this specific medium. Because that's the other thing, Josh, that a lot of people don't look at. This is a unique medium, and a lot of people are still plug and play. Like what worked for me on site is going to work the same here, and it doesn't, because this is a different medium than a face-to-face engagement. So some simple things like, and I'll take what you just said for Stephen King or whoever, warming up a little bit, get your heart pumping a little bit, get mentally and physically ready to perform at the top of your intelligence to the best of your ability. That will increase the probability of pulling people in, whether you are face-to-face, whether you're on an old school phone call, or whether you're using one of these social platforms to increase engagement.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to ask you this because I feel like you've probably got a really good flow for this. How do you do that warm up? Because I know some people feel really dumb. I personally, I'm in my office by myself, and it's very easy to do these things. But I'm like, if somebody else was in here, I'd feel like a complete idiot. Because I kind of do Tony Robbins type warm up things. I'm curious what your thought is on those. Like, what do you use?
Anything from just putting the Beats by Dre on, some headphones on, and just listen to the music that kind of gets me in the zone. I will take it. I'll start on sort of like what can normal people do, not improv goofballs, Muppets like me. Shower, a nice long shower, where I'm just letting the water just hit you and just kind of getting the right headspace for it. Walk around my house. I do like to hug and chase my kids around that. And then I'm like, that's why I'm doing this. And I come in and get really focused. Sit-ups, push-ups, jumping jacks, do your power poses if you want to, anything that puts you in that right headspace. So here's the thing for me, beyond what I do, because I'll walk around in front of people looking like a Muppet, or I'll do it by myself and look like a Muppet. It's whatever it takes for me to get mentally and physically ready, that's what I'm going to do on any given day. What I would say, though, is each person has to find the thing that works for them. It's got to be authentic to that individual. So your yelling or whatever it might be that really puts you in that right position might not be the same thing that works for me, and it shouldn't be, because we're very different people. Now, as long as we both get to that same spot, that's what we're talking about. And one person can bring that other person to the spot. Like if you're really pumped up and I came in unfocused, there's a high probability that I'm going to be pulled in by you, engaged by you. And that's going to put me in that right headspace. So there's a level of ownership that we should all have around our own energy, our own attitude that we bring to any engagement, regardless of the medium or proximity.
Yeah, and I love that because I've even found for me, so I'm a very introverted person. And so like when we get around groups of people, I am the person who's kind of off by myself, or like off with I always play with the kids when I'm when we're around there, right? And it's really interesting because most entrepreneurs, we feel that same way, right? We can do these one-to-one interactions because we care about you, we're willing to do that. But as an introvert, it's kind of scary to do that. I know for me, I have to do it multiple times throughout the day. Almost before every single call, I have to I don't do like power poses or anything, but I found I have to really change my physiology because I'll end up hunching or I'm like texting or something, right? And like, okay, I can't do that before a call. I've got to sit back and open up and be present. Otherwise I'm slogging, right? And so for you, your methodology is all about finding what's right for you in that moment and then leveraging that over and over again. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's not just that moment, because sometimes it needs to change.
Right.
So before an improv show, for example, I performed with a group called Baby Wants Candy, and we do hour-long completely improvised musicals with a full band. And they're improvising all the music on the fly. I listen to so many musicals in their entirety before I would even get to the theater. So I'd block out like an hour and a half, 2 hours in my early days of doing this, my first 500 of them, let's say. And then after a while, I was like, I've listened to a lot of musicals. I'm kind of burnt out of that. I need to switch this up. And so I would go to the gym right before, and then I'd come in with that kind of energy and that focus. Now I'm not doing either one of those two things. And so what I do on a day-to-day basis quite often is pretty simple. It's just like I'll bounce around a little bit. I'll just kind of get my arms moving back and forth, like Michael Phelps, swimming style, and really think about the audience that I want to reach, the people I want to reach, and the message that I want to deliver to them. Because especially through this medium, you have to put that little extra effort into it. And there's where I see it working for me. So for me, it's not a cookie cutter situation of what works on any given day. I'll end up mixing it up based on how I'm feeling, what my headspace is like, what the heck is happening in the world that might pull me out of my focus, and do whatever I can to make sure that I'm here and present on any given day.
Yeah, and I love that. And I want to kind of turn the conversation a little bit towards that improv. You kind of hinted at it with the play, right? Like pulling up the musicals. Sorry, I can't remember what that was called. So like from the musicals. So for you, in a business scenario, right? A lot of us are like, oh, I don't want to be an actor, right? And improv seems like this. You just have to be really good at being creative and flamboyant. But in a business setting, so if you're trying to increase sales, what's kind of the improv that you're teaching and showing people how to do?
Sure. So the common association with improvisation is pretty much what you said, right? It's related to creativity. It's related to comedy. That's where most people will associate it, whether it's Whose Line Is It Anyway or any of those great improv houses around the globe. There's so many fantastic ones. And of course, Chicago is the nucleus for all of this. And that is a specific type of improvisation. That's a specific outcome of improvisation. However, a lot of people think the special forces, they improvise on missions, and no one associates what they do with comedy. If you watch any cooking shows, any cooking competitions to be specific, it's what's in the basket. I don't know, pull it out, put it together, make it work against your competitors, or in the bigger team environments, the same type of thing. No one associates that with comedy whatsoever. So this is a challenge that a lot of business people have, that right away we just kind of diminish this or dismiss this, as opposed to really understanding what improvisation is. And so the way that we define improv in business improv is on 3 core competencies, and that's reacting, adapting, and communicating. Reacting, adapting, communicating. Reacting is focus, it's concentration, it's presence in real time at a high level. Adapting is if you're reacting within parameters, trying to achieve an outcome, like in a strategy to this crazy environment, for example, or a sales conversation, or a collaboration. You're reacting and adapting. And then subroute to both of these is communication. We're not in space, we're not in a vacuum. There's always someone with whom we can react and adapt, or something to which we must react and adapt. And so that could be applied to the outcome of comedy, definitely. It could be applied to food, and it definitely should be applied to entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, business owners.
Yeah, and so when we're trying to leverage improv, so let me just give you a scenario with this, right? You and I we go on podcasts all the time. So when you go onto a podcast, there is a level of improv, and it's guided by somebody, but you have to be prepared in a sense. I've found that the best conversations come when I'm not overly prepared, though. Is that kind of your methodology, is like over prep or under prep? Where do you sit?
It's all about preparation. It's all about planning. Great improvisation thrives at this pivotal moment when planning and strategy meets execution. Right there. It's not to dismiss planning and strategy. It's, well, what happens when you're executing? Right at that moment, that's where your improvisation will either sink or it's going to fly. And it's really, for me, based in the training. So I do like over preparing, and then before the gig, backing up. Just like I'll show up to a on-site gig, I'll show up early, check the audience out, watch the speakers before me, whatever it might be, so I can gauge the situation. And that way, in that moment, it relates to what you said. There's a lot of rawness that is there. And that's really what I like as well, because the unpredictability of just people, let alone situations, for an improviser, that's where you thrive. You thrive in change. You thrive in driving change and being part of change. You thrive in just this give and take of the unknown that exists. And that's something that all of us can learn, which does not relate to being introverted or extroverted in any way. It's how you do it that would relate to probably that behavior choice. Otherwise, we all have to do it anyway, right? So it's just like, all right, well, what can we do to keep that freshness and at the same time be on point pivoting inside of a strategy, for example?
Yeah, and that's awesome. So, and I love that methodology. I kind of want to relate it back to your story, about the musicals, because you watched a bunch of musicals before you went and did that, right? And we think about comedians as like, oh, they're just really good off the cuff people, because we all know that person they're really good at just throwing random crap out there and it's hilarious, right? But I have a sister-in-law, that's how she is, right? And she's known for that because she's just witty. But even if you put them in an environment, they would probably crash and burn because they hadn't done the preparation like you're talking about. They wouldn't be able to do it any better than any of us. So you're saying it's all about understanding what works and then adapting and applying it, right? Is that kind of where you're sitting at?
As improvisation relates to business, definitely. You
Yeah.
have to have that knowledge. You have to have that awareness as well, right? Because without awareness, then how in the world are you going to improvise? You're going to improvise out of ignorance? You're going to improvise out of just random luck? Is that what it is? You have to have a high level of awareness in order to achieve any specific outcome, let alone do whatever it takes to achieve that outcome.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I love that. Great answer. So when it comes to improv in a business setting, let's say I'm coming to you because a lot of people here are like personal brands. They have, consulting or they're a podcast or what have you. What would be the first area you would target for somebody who's trying to build a personal brand when it comes to improv?
It would start with awareness. It really would. Like, where are you right now? Let's talk about your base. Let's talk about your background. Let me get it, do my due diligence, of course, get a firm understanding of where you are, because then you create a path for growth from there. And so from that, the next thing probably is agility. How good are you? Which is different than adaptability. You need agility to be adaptable. You don't have to be adaptable to be agile, though. If you need proof on that, throw something at a cat. Watch how fast they jump. They don't have they're
Yeah,
not
no joke there.
right? It's like, yeah, throw your slipper near a cat. The cat's going to jump up. They're very agile animals. They're not necessarily driving to catch something or do something. All right, so now it's if you're agile though, then it's okay. Now how are you going to put this awareness and this agility together to operate inside your strategy, your outcomes? What is your goal with all of this? Because not everybody's goal is to get on Saturday Night Live, and not everybody's goal is to be a master chef, and not everybody's goal is to be a warrior. So how are you going to use this? And then it's a matter of crafting that game plan in place to succeed using this. Because I said it before, it's worth repeating. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be meaningful, intentional, purposeful to the individual who's doing it. Because if it's not, then it's disingenuous, and that's dangerous.
Yeah. And I love that because what you're really hitting on is like how the vehicle in which you're getting across to the people that you want to connect with. And I know for us, like for when I still wanted to start the podcast, I knew I wanted an audience. I knew I wanted to start connecting with entrepreneurs. I love working with entrepreneurs, but I was terrified of getting on camera. And I knew if I started doing a YouTube channel, I'd fail. I would just fail at it because at the time I wasn't good at it. But I knew I'm like, well, I could get good at it eventually. But I had a mentor. He's like, well, then why don't you just do a podcast? It's like, are you confident talking to people and recording the audio? I was like, yes, I can do that. I can absolutely do that. I know for me, that was like you say, kind of that adaptability, because it's saying, okay, what way are you comfortable? What way can you leverage this? And through doing it, like for me, right, being on the podcast all the time, it's gotten me to where I am comfortable on camera now. And so I don't know. Does that make sense? It kind of fits in your model there.
Absolutely. And I think this is where a lot of people actually hit walls, right? Hit walls starting out, hit walls with growth, that we just keep trying to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, which is the definition of what? It's insanity, right? So what you did was say, look, I'm not good at being on camera. I can recognize that that's not my comfort zone. It's not my strength right now. Let's back up away from this. What am I good at? You found somebody who is a mentor who can give you some outside perspective. You then became a student of your own behavior, learning from somebody else. You found something that you have a base in, which is just talking to people, a podcast. And then from there, that natural growth, in that mindset of growth, And evolution takes place where now you're like, yeah, and I'm on camera as well. And if you ask me when I started all this, I would have said never. Never would I be on camera. Now I'm like, no, I'm super comfortable with this because you went back, you found your base, and you started going off of your base. You weren't limited by your base, which is, I guess, another way to look at what I was saying at the top of this, that if we focus on what we're limited by and only what we're limited by, we're probably not going to leave that because that's where all of our time, all of our energy is. As opposed to saying, all right, I'm limited by this, so what? Okay, then why am I spending so much time on this thing that I'm limited? What about this other stuff that doesn't limit me? Even within the confines of this mess that we're in right now. There's so much possibility. There is so much potential. It's a matter of recognizing it and doing something with it.
Yeah, I love that. And honestly, like as a good almost final note, we're not done here, but we're getting close. As almost a final note, I think that really is kind of the big message here is it's all about understanding who you are, how you fit into it, and leveraging what you have. I think the number one thing that stops most people is they're just scared to death of what they don't know. But the
Mm-hmm.
reality is what you don't know really is never that hard. It's very, very simple. And it's just getting past the fear barrier most of the time, especially in the personal branding space.
Sure.
And so I want to ask you this question just because it's a little bit, it is a little bit off topic, but kind of fits into the context. So for a lot of our listeners, they are at a stage where they're not sure they want to continue with their business. They're like, I've hit $1 million or 6 figures and I'm just not loving it, not loving where I'm at. But what you're talking about, like that adaptability, you can pivot. And that's kind of what you're helping people with, right? Is saying, hey, pivot, adjust your messaging, focus heavily on bettering yourself so that communication increases and allows you to connect with your customers. So like,
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Oh yeah, a lot of people just get caught in their head, right?
Right.
Whether it is focusing on the negative or the restrictions, the reasons why we can't succeed or we shouldn't succeed as well, going back to that sort of fear-based type of thought, which exists in everybody on some level, and at certain times in anybody's life it could be pretty heavy. It's taking that and saying, okay, it exists, that's fine. And maybe we don't need to break this. Maybe we don't need to change this. Let's look at more holistically because that level of awareness that I've mentioned a couple of times, that's an imperative. And sometimes you need outside perspective. You need people to come around you and say, like, look at all this other great stuff you're doing. You're so passionate about this. And that actually aligns with what you're doing here. It's actually an extension of your brand with very little tweaking, very little effort. And that allows you to expand your market. That allows you to bring a new message to the market that you already have. That allows you to further define your personal brand, what you bring to the table. And so there's a lot of what I do for people and for organizations is teach them how to react, adapt, communicate. That pivot becomes super important. And sometimes we just get stuck and we don't even know how to do it.
Yeah. And I love that. So I'm just going to repeat that for everybody if you missed that. I know we brought it up already, but like react, adapt, communicate. I think that's the core issue that we're struggling with right now as a society, just because they're stuck in the react phase. They're not adapting because they're just panicking saying, oh, I can't wait till it gets back to the way it was. It could be 5 more years before we aren't wearing masks. Like who knows? It may be never.
Yeah.
Like we may all be working virtually for the rest of forever.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, even when we get this miracle cure that's in herd immunity and we all come back together again, this virtual aspect is not going to leave us permanently. We will never, as a society, go 100% back to the way it was. This has to be part of it. So at what point, if we're not reacting and adapting really to this, taking advantage of the strengths of this specific medium, this situation through the computer, I mean specifically, then at what point will we? Because competitors are. People are beginning to find best practices inside of this. And so if we're married into this idea that I'm just going to wait it out, or this scramble style of leadership / strategy that existed over the last 10 months, is that sustainable for the future? And at what point will that bulking come into play of like, I have to train in this, I have to get better at this, I have to be more knowledgeable at this, I have to be more comfortable with this? Because even once we get back to on-site engagements, which I hope is very, very, very soon, we're still going to have to communicate, collaborate, build teams, cohesion, trust, bring our messages out, build relationships with people through distance mediums, whether it's the phone or the computer.
Yeah, and I love that. And I would hope everybody would listen to this interview and think about that in your own company. You kind of threw it in there, but I think coaching and finding somebody to help you pull you out of it, you're not going to get over these things by yourself. You're kidding yourself if you think that you can overcome interpersonal barriers, fears, or whatever in your life. It really comes from finding somebody who can validate what's right, help you acknowledge what's wrong and change it, and then you can move forward. And that's why, Bob, like with what you're doing, I love that, because your entire business is built around helping people to pull that out of them. I can get rid of those fears, react, adapt, communicate, right? So I want to ask you this. Where can people connect with you and get access to what you're doing?
Thank you very much. Connect to Business Improv. Find Business Improv. Reach out to us. We will get back to you. We have an online program if you're interested in just personal and professional development. It's called Improvisational Communication, and that's the normal. You buy it, you own it, you go at your own pace. Download the worksheets. You'll have an action plan when that's done. And also we have open enrollment programs, Improvisational Communication Live. And that's more of a consortium style for you to practice off of other people, create a network with people as well, share challenges and struggles, and get feedback from people in a very non-competitive way. So it's a way to find peer groups that can help with that type of development as well. And it all starts and stops with Business Improv.
Well, we came full circle, clear from at the beginning when you're the first business you would build be connecting people. But look at that, you do that now. Mind blowing, right?
No, it's true. It's such a huge part of that open enrollment program that I'm so excited about, that we are forming that network. I never actually thought about it that way. Like we will have a dedicated space. We do have a dedicated space on LinkedIn where alumni are getting together. Me and my team get together and run master classes with them as well. So yeah, I didn't really think about it that way. So I guess I'm doing what I want to do.
Yeah, there it is. Well, everybody, make sure you go check that out. So it's Business Improv. You can pretty much find that everywhere. Great guys, great company. And Bob, I really appreciate you coming on. But before we sign off, I have one final question for you. So we've covered a lot of topics. So what is the one thing you would like to leave with our audience? If they remember nothing else from the interview but this, what would you like them to remember?
Try. Never give up. Keep trying. Create a safe space to try. It doesn't always have to be front and center in front of other people, and the failure that will inevitably come with trying does not necessarily have to be a public event. You can create safe spots to try, spaces to try, and put yourself out there in a very strategic way for strategic failure. Just create that environment to try and never give up.